Now, as the conference approached, a question began to form in my mind. And it was that after 13 years of leading IBC, what did I want to try and leave you with? What message did I want to try and share? And on a personal note, I want you to know how much I've appreciated the support, the fellowship, and the friendship of so many of you across our industry. But professionally, I want to leave you with my sense of how things are changing in the world. How these changes may affect our industry and what we need to do to be ready. In particular, I want to focus on the challenge posed by the growing protection gap, which represents both a challenge and an opportunity for insurers. Now, insurance is not an industry that people typically associate with rapid transformation. In fact, a big part of the reason that people rely on us and have confidence in us is our predictability and our reliability. In their eyes, we're boring, but in a good way. We protect people from familiar risks, and we've been doing that for centuries. But change is all around us. Economic forces are once again driving transitions in commercial insurance. Our changing climate is contributing to severe weather events that are putting more Canadians in harm's way. Changing technology is creating new threats for companies as they struggle to cope with cybercrime. Risks are evolving and emerging. Needs are changing. So not surprisingly then, we look at the reality of today's marketplace and we see a gap. A gap between the amount of insurance that would make sense financially for people and the amount of coverage that our customers actually buy. And the gap is getting larger. And that should stop us all dead in our tracks. And I'll say it again, people aren't buying the amount of insurance that makes sense for them. That's a problem for our customers, it's a problem for us, and it's a problem for the economic health, quite frankly, of the country. And it's a problem that goes beyond short-term financial implications. If customers aren't buying the coverage we're offering, or if we're not offering the coverage that customers want and need, then how are we relevant in their lives? And what will happen should our relevancy continue to erode? We need to be ready to help protect Canadians against the threats of tomorrow, not just the familiar threats of today, or worse still, the fading threats of yesterday. We need to work harder than ever to understand what our customers want, what they need, and what they will need in a year or a decade. We need to maintain our place as a highly relevant industry that occupies a pivotal role in their lives and their futures. Now, I would wager that a strong majority of people in this room believe life insurance to be an essential part of a responsible financial plan. Yet here in Canada and around the world, more and more people are choosing or feeling they have no choice but to sacrifice life insurance coverage. Swiss Re estimates the so-called mortality protection gap at $114 trillion globally. And although our focus here is obviously on P&C, I've learned something from my term as president of the Global Federation of Insurance Associations. I've learned that the life insurance story can reveal important and relevant truths. In this case, the number itself tells us something, not just from its size, but from the fact that it's the result of a series of individual decisions. Person by person, family by family, people are deciding to forego life insurance or to choose a policy that is unlikely to be sufficient for their needs. And that's a troubling pattern. It's also similar with earthquake coverage here in Canada. For some, it's a cost issue. For others, perhaps it's the mentality of it'll never happen here. But whatever the reason, the gap in protection is significant and growing. In Quebec, the gap is close to 100%. Even in BC, it's around 50%, and head it in the wrong direction. Now, should the unthinkable happen, many Canadians would have no financial protection. We did some polling recently, and we found that only 24% of Canadians who have earthquake insurance feel they'd be able to cover the deductible on a claim. And more than half of Canadians simply hold out the hope that government will step in and help them. So there are a number of challenges here that we must still confront. And then there's cyber. Ransomware and cyber attacks on both supply chains and critical infrastructures pose a greater threat than ever to companies and society. The average data breach in Canada now costs more than $7 million. In our world, cyber-related premiums around the globe are expected to rise to $22 billion by 2025, which is compared to $9 billion last year. Now, we all know that as a potential business line, cyber is particularly difficult and complex. But we still need to ask ourselves, are the products we offer keeping pace with the nature and scope of the challenge? Corporations, small business, and yes, even insurers face growing vulnerability from extortionists. Ransoms are rising along with the sheer number of attacks, one every 11 seconds, according to Cybersecurity Ventures. So are we doing enough to close the gap? Now consider for a moment the floods in British Columbia last year. All told, they caused more than $10 billion in damage. But insured losses totaled only $679 million. Now, in most industries, people might say, great, we were lucky not to have been on the hook for more. But I think many in our industry found themselves thinking, a major disaster occurred in Canada, caused by a peril that consumers can buy coverage for, and in the end, we weren't especially relevant to how it was resolved. We weren't relevant to how people got back on their feet. In the end, we didn't matter that much. Now, the floods in BC highlight an ongoing issue. When it comes to insurance, there currently isn't a product for people who live in the areas of highest risk. And even when insurance is available, most people choose not to buy it or aren't aware of it. Indeed, our polling shows that even people who are told they are in harm's way are more likely not to reject the idea of buying special flood insurance. Now, that should be a concern to each and every one of us. And we have work to do, because occupying a place in the lives of Canadians, filling a role and being relevant to their lives is central. It's central to our success. So, how can we begin to address these gaps in protection? Well, I think we can do it in two ways. First, as is often the case, we need to look inward. There's a famous quote from Emerson, that great American philosopher, who said, "The only person you're destined to become is the person you choose to be." And that's also true for industries. Who are we going to choose to be? Are we going to be a legacy industry that serves only the legacy needs of our customers? Or will we choose to be an industry that keeps one eye on the future, on emerging risks, on changing needs, so that we are and remain relevant in the lives of Canadians? Now, you don't have to look very hard to find examples of companies and industries that in recent years have let it all get away from them. Travel agents, taxi companies, the record industry, Kodak, Toys R Us, the list goes on. They didn't see the challenges coming, or they saw the challenges and dismissed them as insignificant, probably a bump in the road. They were catastrophically, almost comically wrong. Now, let me be clear. I'm not suggesting for a moment that our entire industry is in danger of being replaced by an app that's being cooked up somewhere in Silicon Valley. We're a cornerstone of Canadian life and the Canadian economy. But there is danger in hubris, and there are risks to complacency, risks to our own financial future, and risks to the well-being of our customers and potential customers. And it goes beyond the bottom line. More than almost any other industry, we have a responsibility to keep our finger on the pulse of societal change. When existing risks evolve, we need to be ready and willing to change with them. When new risks emerge, we need to be there to protect people. And we need to share our efforts with Canadians. Our polling shows that as many as half of all Canadians don't know whether they have insurance coverage for various natural disasters. Some of the threats I've been talking about today, there's no getting around it. They can be difficult to insure. So it won't always be easy for us. We will need to harness all of our ingenuity to meet the challenge. That means new products when needed, new solutions when needed, a commitment to thinking and acting with an eye on the long term, on changing trends and emerging challenges, and always, always remembering we do best as an industry when we fill a need or ease an anxiety in the lives of our customers. Now, the second way we can work to address the protection gap is by understanding the advantages of working with government. Now, there are some, hopefully none in this room, who may argue that the best strategy in dealing with government is to call the minister and tell her what we want and then hang up the phone until such time as we have another wish list. We can think of this as the one-way street strategy, which is, please give us what we'd like, and when you're done doing that, please give us a little bit more. Those days of government relations, if they ever existed, certainly are over. So let's turn our attention for a moment to the kind of approach that might work in the real world. In the real world, no industry gets to dictate its terms, nor does it get to exist in a vacuum, removed from the realities of the world. If we want government to pay attention to the issues that matter most to us, we need to engage on the issues that matter to government and Canadians. And it can't be a monologue. It has to be a conversation, a two-way street. Let me give you a quick example, and I'll use the flood and the climate files. So on behalf of our members, we spent many, many years working behind the scenes to educate government to the reality that floods are becoming more common, more dangerous, and more destructive. And we told them that water was becoming the new fire. As a result, more homes and more Canadians are at risk. So this advocacy was one part of a broader attempt to highlight the impact of our changing climate and the need for governments to take action to better defend Canadians with measures aimed at adapting to this new normal. But to be candid, for a very long time, we didn't get very far. I remember a meeting in particular with the federal minister back in 2017 with the springtime waters overflowing the banks of the Ottawa River. You could almost see it out his office window. And we laid out the facts. We emphasized the potentially wide-ranging repercussions for our industry, but obviously for Canadians. But it still felt like we and the minister were talking past each other. And it only clicked when we laid our cards on the table and said that we were willing to do our part to find and implement solutions that work not only for us, but for taxpayers. We also made it clear that we were more than willing to cede to the government both the spotlight and the credit. And we told the minister that Canadians needed his leadership to solve this flood challenge. Now, this had the benefit of both flattering him, but also being true. Rather than act as a voice of pure advocacy, we set our sights on winning and keeping a seat at the table, acting as a partner and a positive force. Now, that's when we finally began to get traction. That's when we started making real progress on behalf of our members and indeed on behalf of Canadians at large. And just over the last year, the federal government has announced a national policy on climate adaptation and mitigation. And it's launched a new plan aimed at reducing the impact of floods in the years ahead. This is huge, huge for us and huge for the country. And right now we're working with government and others to build a new national flood insurance plan to protect homeowners in high-risk flood zones. In the world of the one-way street, our industry might be tempted to take the best bits of business here and leave the rest for the federal government to backstop. But I can tell you that if you try and do that, you won't have a seat at the table for very long. You won't be seen as a valued partner if your solution is to simply throw the hard stuff back at the feet of government. As another minister memorably put it to me during the pandemic, if we don't see you as part of the solution, we start seeing you as part of the problem. Today, IBC is playing a major role in flood policy and climate adaptation policy in Canada. And together, our industry has emerged as one of the most influential voices in this important area. In doing so, we've begun to address the gaps in flood coverage. And make no mistake, this is all connected, the role we're playing and the progress we're making. Whether we consider the short or long-term perspective, our industry is better served by being at the table, a phrase we heard several times today. We are better served by playing a proactive and progressive role in trying to confront challenges that will affect our industry and indeed our country. Now, many of you here today are IBC member companies. A few of you belong to companies that are not. However, all benefit from our successes. The list of wins just over the last 10 years is very long, and the impact on companies' top and bottom line is easily in the billions of dollars. Now, I'm certain that all insurers are pleased with these outcomes, but right now, not all insurers are contributing. Now, since I'm retiring, I can perhaps be just slightly less diplomatic today in speaking to those of you who remain outside the tent. IBC stands up for all of us. It works for all of us. And over the years, it's made progress and gains for all of us. So just as we share in the benefits, we should share in the responsibilities and stand together. And frankly, that goes for anyone whose company benefits from the work of an effective trade association. Whether you're an insurer, a broker, an adjuster, we all do better when we all pitch in. Now, 10 years ago, I gave a speech here at IBC where I called on our industry to show leadership, to play a more active and meaningful role in Canadian life. And today, I give the industry full marks for stepping up and speaking out, especially over the past few years. We have shown leadership within the financial sector and across a range of policy issues. And this is the kind of leadership we need to help close the gaps in protection and to secure our place at the table. I've talked about flood and climate. Another example is earthquake. And we're starting to see results as we work towards a public-private partnership that will close the gap and help Canadians get the coverage they need. But the challenge now on this file and others is to reinforce that spirit of leadership by speaking as one with a voice of authority and with influence on issues that matter to Canadians. By working together to better serve our customers, not only meeting but also anticipating their needs by focusing on the future. And that's how we'll close the protection gap. And that's how we will remain relevant. And that's how we will write the next chapter of our shared success. Now, by way of conclusion today, I want to tell you something from my heart. I've always taken great pride in having been entrusted with this role. For 13 years, I've had the honor and the responsibility to speak for and act on behalf of an industry that's essential to Canadian life. An industry that plays a pivotal role in helping people when they need it most. The companies represented in this room are fierce competitors. Insurers, brokers, adjusters, you fight hard for your share of the market. And Canadians benefit from that. And yet, I've always had the greatest appreciation for what you're able to accomplish when you come together. When you came together and worked together in Fort McMurray, in Calgary, in BC, in the aftermath of so many other natural disasters. When you came together on the commercial file recently to help customers find their way to affordable insurance during an incredibly difficult time. When you came together on the climate file, speaking to government and Canadians in a single progressive voice, sharing insights and proposing a new way forward. And when you came together in the wake of the pandemic to deliver real and meaningful relief to Canadians at a time when so many other industries were not. You are competitors, but you share a collective interest. When we come together, when you come together, the insurance industry enhances its shared reputation. You build goodwill with government and Canadians at large. And you're able, together, to tackle the big challenges like the one posed by the protection gap. And we live in a time of change. We can feel it all around us. We see it in our own personal lives. But my hope is that you see the opportunity that lies before you, that you embrace the need to change and grow and evolve in order to seize that opportunity, and that you do it together, acting in the interest of the industry and the country that we share. Thank you very much.